All right. Welcome back to Anatomy and Physiology here with your professor, Dr. Shawn Clavell. Today we're continuing through the muscular system here, and in the second section of this system lecture, we're talking about two main ideas or two concepts. The first is the criteria that are used to name muscles, so that'll be helpful in identifying the names of muscles that we see on the human body. And the second is identifying patterns of fasicular arrangement. This is also referred to as the fiber arrangement. We often see that in a number of different pictures. There's the fibers that are being identified, right, in a particular arrangement here. Let me see if I can't find a picture in terms of this reference. Let's go with the rhomboids. You can see the rhomboids here. If we zoom in, you can see that there's like a fiber arrangement here that can be identified. And this fiber arrangement comes in a few patterns, and it'll help us to identify the direction of force, but also what type of force is being produced. Is this a powerful motion that's going to be quicker, or is this going to be a stronger motion that's made for strength? And so first we'll talk about this idea of naming criteria. And so skeletal muscles are named according to a number of criteria. There it is. They are named by a list of criteria. And to simplify the task of actually learning these muscles, it may behoove you, or it may be of our benefit to learn the following cues as it may come up in terms of the muscle names. And so the first thing that we want to talk about might be the location of a muscle. So the general location of a muscle, whether it's like the example might be given here is like the temporalis muscle. So located right over the temporal bone of the skull, the temporalis muscle is an example. Muscles that have names according to their shape usually have a rather distinctive shape. So a muscle like the deltoid refers to a more triangular shaped muscle, or the deltoid is a triangular shaped muscle, as well as like the trapezius muscle, which kind of gives the shape of a trapezoid. The size of the muscle might be indicated in the name here. So think of muscles like maximus, medius, minimus. I'll give you a couple of other ones. If there's a longus, there is usually a brevis. So the opposite of longus is brevis, meaning short or brief, right? So the muscles on their size, the direction of their muscle fibers. Again, as we mentioned before, we talked about the fascicular arrangement or the fiber arrangement, and so we'll talk about that a little bit more later. But that could also be indicated in the name. So names of some muscles reveal the directions in which their fibers run. So think of like oblique muscles that run in a diagonal pattern, and transverse muscles run across the body. So just to name a few, the transverse, oblique, yeah. The number of origins, think of muscles like your biceps, your triceps, quadriceps, all have a 2, 3, or 4 different origins, respectively. And then finally, in terms of the muscle action, we think of muscles like supinator, pronator, flexor. So let's try that. Flexor, extensor,
Here are some results.
and let's say adductors, right? You've got your adductors as well. So again, we can see here that there's a few examples of the criteria that are used for naming muscles. And so whether it's the location, shape, size, the direction of those muscle fibers, oblique or transverses are pretty common references. The number of origins, biceps, triceps, quadriceps, and then the actions of that muscle can all indicate, as well as the action also can indicate where it's located, right? So if it's a flexor, then it would be located in, the anterior component in the upper extremity and maybe in the posterior component in the lower extremity. But this, again, the name could indicate the location, but the action could also indicate where that location may be as well. And so the second concept that we'll talk about is this idea of fasicular arrangement or fasicular organization, maybe even called fiber arrangement. And so the idea is that, remember that muscles are made up of these bundles of muscle fibers called fascicles, and these fascicles arrange in a variety of different shapes and functional capacities here. So the most common patterns for fascicular arrangement are penate, parallel, convergent, and circular muscles. Let's take a look at the first here at the top of the screen, where we see circular muscles. Now, circular muscles are muscles where the fascicles are arranged in a concentric ring. These are generally referred to as sphincters. And they are examples, like you can see here in the mouth, orbicularis oris. There's a sphincter of the eye, orbicularis oculi. But the benefit of this is that it allows our bowels and bladders to be, allows our general openings and entrances to be under volitional control. The next term here is convergent muscles. So convergent muscles are muscles that have a very broad origin and then taper down into a narrow insertion. So these muscles often look like a triangle or a fan shape. So the pectoralis major is an example of a convergent muscle. And again, this is a muscle that is pretty much built for strength. You can see how all of the idea here is that all of these fibers can grow or end up in one single common area. There are two types of parallel arrangements in terms of muscles. You can see that the biceps demonstrates a fusiform parallel muscle, meaning that it has two tapered ends with a enlarged belly. See, there's the belly here that we're talking about. And this is a fusiform type of parallel muscle, whereas a sartorius, the muscle here, which kind of runs just like a long thread like a long thread, is called a non-fusiform. So what you have here is just the fibers running in one parallel direction. Now, these types of muscles are more responsible for providing speed, right, and a lot more movement. So what we have here is, imagine, the sarcomeres running in a parallel pattern where they all run down the length, whereas what we'll see in some of these other muscles called penate muscles, they travel a much shorter distance. So muscles that are parallel demonstrate speed. They also demonstrate a greater range of motion versus the penate muscles. And so finally, you've been asking, what is a penate muscle? And so a penate muscle is a muscle that gets its name from the, let's see if I can't find one. There's one right here. Gets its name from a feather, right? So penate refers to its feather-like shape. And so in a penate muscle, what we have is a single common central tendon, and then the muscle fibers themselves actually run in a oblique or diagonal pattern off of this central tendon. And so the benefit of having these shape is that you have more muscle fiber connections, so you can create more strength. Strength. And so you can have you could have a unipennate. So a unipennate comes off of one side. That's what I'm drawing now. You could have a bipennate. That's what we see. I just demonstrated. Kind of looks like a leaf or a feather. This is a bipennate. And then you can have a multipennate, which is a muscle like the deltoid, which is a multipennate muscle. But this makeup of this pennate, so yeah, they got a multi-pennate. It's got multiple, like a central tendon there, it'll have a tendon there, and so these muscles will ultimately kind of insert into the deltoid, radial tuberosity, the deltoid tuberosity, on the humerus, and then pull forward, pull the arm out to the side. And so that is the concept here of the pennate muscles. They provide much more strength compared to the parallel muscles, which provide much more movement, range of motion, as well as a little bit faster they contract. And that'll wrap up our second part of the muscular system lecture here, where we talked about the criteria for naming muscles, as well as the common patterns of fiber arrangement or fasicular arrangement, and which one provide a little bit more power versus which ones provide a little bit more strength. The remainder of this chapter includes many of the muscles, including the origins, insertions, and actions of them, which will always be helpful for you guys to identify here. I'll give you an example, kind of like our pectoralis major, right? The muscle that starts at the clavicle, the sternum, and even some of the ribs. It inserts into the greater tubercle of the humerus and is responsible for shoulder flexion, shoulder adduction. We could take a look at that here. There's adduction, remember that. And this next one's a little bit of, there it is, a little bit of medial rotation as well. We haven't talked about that too much, but you can see, and hopefully you can appreciate the fact that this is going to rotate inwards as it pulls there. So you're getting medial rotation or internal rotation of the shoulder. But again, what you'll be seeing is just the rest of this chapter, just identifying these muscles, being able to name the muscles, their origins, their insertions, and their actions. But until next time, I continue to wish you guys the best as you move through the anatomy and physiology of the human body. Take care and best wishes.